Okay, we now have another little what we call a parade panel, a sequence of people who are going to talk to you about how the summit plans to respond and what it is that brought them personally to the summit. So what I want you to listen for is what brought them. Does that resonate with you? Is there something that they are telling you about work that we're going to be doing that you want to be a part of? So listen for your why as we invite people to come up here. At the end, I'm going to close with one other really exciting panel that I want to bring your attention to. But with that, it's my privilege to introduce to you Nick Rasmussen.
Hi, good morning. This is my second opportunity to appear at Eradicate Hate, and I've learned one thing over the course of the 2 years I've been engaged with the Pittsburgh community. You don't say no to Laura Ellsworth when she asks you to do something. But she didn't have to ask very hard because this is the place where the conversation is happening. The organization I lead, the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, brings technology companies together in an effort to address the challenges of terrorism and violent extremism, particularly in the online world. And of course, we're all digital natives sitting in this room. Why is that work important to this summit? I think it's pretty obvious, and I'd submit that the answer is pretty straightforward and, as I said, obvious. GIFCT, the organization I lead, exists because for all the good that happens in the online world, there is also a price we all pay for our participation in and our engagement with the online world. Every day in that online world, we see both the very, very best of humanity as well as the dark currents of hatred, extremism, and intolerance. And those dark currents often lead some to carry out horrific acts of violence, such as you experienced here in Pittsburgh. So animated and motivated by that simple truth, the technology companies that I work with that comprise GIFCT have accepted the responsibility to do better and to make that online environment safer, healthier, and free of hatred and violence. Now, I've been in this role in GIFCT for just a bit over 2 years, and across that time, I'm both very encouraged at the progress being made, but even more motivated by the work that still remains to be done, the challenges that remain yet unaddressed. So much work remains to be done, and that's why the opportunity to gather with doers and thinkers and leaders here in Pittsburgh is so important. Now, the program over the next 3 days will unpack all of these issues in greater detail, and in particular points in the agenda deal specifically with the online world that I'm so focused on. It's an opportunity for us to learn what's working in online efforts to confront and eliminate hate, but that wouldn't be very, very useful if we stopped at what's working. More importantly, it's also an opportunity to challenge what's being done, what's been done, and to think harder and more creatively than ever about what more we can do to eradicate hate in the online ecosystem that we all inhabit, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. So with that challenge placed front and center today, I'd ask you to bring your ideas, your inspiration, and your passion to that task. Be participatory in these conversations, in these sessions across the 3 days. When we meet here in Pittsburgh in future years, we should be able to chart our progress, we should be able to hold ourselves accountable, and we should be able to point to concrete ways in which we've made the online world less vulnerable to hatred, extremism, and targeted violence aimed at particularly vulnerable communities. That is my hope, and that's why I hope I will be in Pittsburgh with you every year when there's an Eradicate Hate event. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Laura, and the steering committee for this event, for the opportunity to be here again 1 year after the inaugural summit. My name is Vidya Ramalingam. I'm founder and CEO of Moonshot. We're an organization that works with so many in this room to counter hate and extremism online. You'll see my team dotted around the room. There's 5 of us here, and I hope we can connect with all of you during this event. Eradicate Hate is so much more than a conference. It has to be. Our mission, the reason why we're here, it's far too urgent and far too critical for it not to be. And I know that this room is filled with doers. I know each and every one of you are doers. You're people who are actively fighting hate in your communities, fighting hate across the country and across the globe. We can't just be here to talk. We have to do. And one of the themes that you'll see weaving throughout the agenda and the discussions over the coming days is innovation. And I've been to conferences before where there is a dedicated session to innovation and where that's the only part of the event where you actually talk about novel solutions. That's not what we're going to do at this summit. At this summit, every panel, every discussion will be surfacing novel solutions to this problem, from those at the community level, to those that need to be implemented by the tech companies, to those that need to be implemented at the highest levels of government. Tomorrow morning, I'll be part of a plenary discussion specifically reflecting on the horrific violence that we experienced in Buffalo, New York, earlier this year. However, we won't simply be discussing how something like this could happen. We'll be discussing solutions. I'll be speaking about new initiatives Moonshot are launching across the state of New York, including with many partners in this room, like New York Citizens Crime Commission, to ensure that we can effectively intervene with perpetrators before they act. And throughout this week, my team is contributing to panels on building novel forms of safeguarding into tech platforms. There will be multiple panels on that subject, both on Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll be involved in panels on new methods of intervening with perpetrators online, including violent misogynists and incels, an emerging threat. There will be panels on that again, both days, Tuesday and Wednesday. And on how to build ethical prevention efforts. There will be a panel on that tomorrow. And crucially, last but not least, how we safeguard ourselves, the people in this room, people who put themselves, yourselves, and oftentimes our family members and loved ones at risk to do this crucial work. You'll also notice that the role of the internet and how we do prevention online will not be siloed into any one specific track on the role of the internet. This is the reality that we live in. In 2022, there is little divide between the online and offline worlds. So, Moonshot's challenge to you all, my challenge to you all, I urge every single one of you in every discussion in this summit, think about what you can do in ensuring solutions encompass both the offline and online reality that we live in. To conclude, I am absolutely convinced that this group is the solution to this problem in America. And it is such a privilege to be here with all of you and to work with you all on this critical mission. Thank you.
Good morning, Pittsburgh. My name is James Pash, and I am the Regional Director of the ADL for Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. It's an honor to be here with all of you this morning. One of the things that we do at ADL is we track anti-Semitic incidents across the nation in our annual audit report. This past year was our highest year on record since we began tracking of assaults, harassment, and vandalism of the Jewish people. And Western Pennsylvania was no exception to that trend. Last year, regionally, we saw a record high number, which broke the 2020 year before of a record high number. So when I think, why are we here today? We are here because we are gathering with the best and brightest minds from across the globe to figure out how to reverse those trends. The other day, I was watching the release of the Ken Burns documentary on the Holocaust, and there was this scene after the liberation of one of the camps where one of the GIs was writing home to his father, and he said, "Beyond the horrors of everything that I've seen with my own eyes, I can't stop thinking about who knows how much the ideas here have spread." And that line really stuck with me because I think it's one of our greatest challenges that we have in the fight against hate, is the spread of ideas, the mass proliferation of hate in our online world, and we will be addressing that throughout the few days here at the conference. ADL has speakers on the global communication of anti-hate message, the spread of anti-Semitism on the left and on the right, the hate and polarization that we've seen abroad in Central and Eastern Europe, hate-motivated radicalization of violence. We will be addressing all of those topics throughout the week here, and I'd urge you to sit down with one of any of ADL's 10 subject matter experts who are here this week to talk to them about the things that they are seeing on the field. What inspires me to do this work is when we look at the statistics, it's easy to get overwhelmed, but also important to remember that behind all of those statistics are human lives. Mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, and one person is one person too many. And we are here to reverse the trends. And the one thing I know when it comes to the spread of ideas is that there's more of us than there are of them. And it's an honor to be in the room today with all of you, to share ideas, to share how we're going to tackle hate together. And I look forward to this week. Thank you again, and onward. Take care.
Good morning. My name is Ann Claire Williams. I'm of counsel at Jones Day, and before that, I served on the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit and the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. I'm so pleased to join you again at the Eradicate Hate Summit. Why am I here? Well, first, we all have to say yes to the extraordinary, amazing life force, Laura Ellsworth. Second, and more importantly, I said yes because it is a compelling charge for all of us to eradicate hate. Hate that is real, growing threat to our democracy here in the U.S. and around the world. We must continue to develop the best legal strategies on the criminal and civil side of the justice system to eradicate hate. The criminal justice system, bringing charges at the state and federal levels for those who espouse hateful beliefs and act violently, is one way to hold perpetrators accountable. But what if criminal charges are not brought? Criminal cases are hard to put together. The burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. Another way to hold perpetrators accountable is to sue civil litigation. We're going to focus on the Sines versus Kessler case that arose from the Unite the Right violent and deadly rally held on the campus of University of Virginia, where a woman was mowed down and 19 more counter-protesters were injured. That violence, the individual, the neo-Nazi who murdered the woman with his car, was convicted of criminal charges, serving a life sentence. But then the civil cases came. Integrity First America put together a coalition of civil rights organizations, community members in Charlottesville, 9 plaintiffs, law firms donated their time and sued 14 individual organizers and 10 neo-Nazi organizations. The verdict, $26 million against each individual defendant and individual organizations. That case has provided a roadmap of lessons learned, and so the state's United Democracy Center is now supporting a lawsuit in DC filed by the Attorney General against the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers over their involvement in the violent storming of the U.S. Capitol, January 6, 2021. We will provide a critical analysis of what went wrong, what went right before and during the trial, how the live feed was used, out-of-control defendants, and ultimately, the takeaway will be a primer on how to effectively handle these high-profile cases. Finally, I'll be moderating a panel, Investigation versus Entrapment. So as I mentioned earlier, it's hard to gather evidence. So the question is, how can we infiltrate these hate-based organizations to get the evidence needed to prosecute? We'll have an individual who actually went undercover in a hate group. We'll share his experiences. And an expert who you will hear from shortly, Heidi, who was formerly with the Southern Poverty Law Center, Dr. Heidi, I should say, to discuss the tracking of these groups, and information about working undercover in these organizations. They will shed light on good practices, what they are, and how to avoid bad practices so better cases can be brought in the future. During these conversations, we will focus on deliverables. Deliverables, Laura's favorite word, and the goal of the summit, which is so crucial as we continue on the path of effectively using all legal strategies available to us to eradicate hate. It is an honor and privilege to be with all of you during this summit and to work together on eradicating hate. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bill Braniff. I'm the director of the START Center at the University of Maryland and a founding board member of a veteran service organization called We the Veterans. And I'm here because I'm on a mission. And if you're on a mission, you need help. So I'm here to ask for your help. I'm here for to ask for help for the veteran and military families out there who might be watching this on live stream. We're at a critical point, and we think veterans and military families are the solution. So this is me reaching out my hand for you folks.
And hello, everyone. It is such a privilege to be here. I have to credit Laura, as everyone should, for pulling this together. My name is Heidi Byrick. I'm the co-founder of the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism, and as the judge just said a minute ago, I used to be with the Southern Poverty Law Center for a long time. You know, what is important to me about this conference, and it goes back to literally the first conversation I had with Laura probably in 2019, pre-pandemic, is this is all about solutions. You know, I have worked for years tracking far-right extremism. I've seen the growth of these movements, the violence like at the Tree of Life or in El Paso at the Walmart, the burgeoning numbers of attacks, and now the situation in which we have, you know, a real crisis with our election system here in the United States. And as all these things have grown and grown and grown, and I was involved in tracking them as well as many of my colleagues here, the problem has been more of the bad stuff and not enough of the good stuff. And so when Laura first called me and said that this project, the Eradicate Hate Summit, would be about deliverables, about solutions, about bringing people together to talk about these issues and come up with ways to combat them, that was what made this so important. It makes me very, very proud to have been involved in this since, in the process of these summits since the get-go. So that's why I'm here, and like Bill, I'm asking for your help so that we can do something about these problems that are just, you know, overwhelming.
So real quick, Heidi and I helped to organize the track that will look at veterans and active duty military and the relationship to extremism there, as well as law enforcement and the relationship to extremism. So that's the track that we're co-leading. We're going to take you into the research. So we've got some of the best researchers in the country on these topics. They'll introduce this threat to you. But we're then going to turn and focus on solutions. We the veterans, we believe that veterans and military family members present an incredible opportunity to reinforce American civic culture, to support American democracy. And by building on that protective factor that is American civics, that we can crowd out vulnerabilities to hate, extremism, malinformation, those harms to our society. And just to give you a taste of the solution orientation here, let's say, for example, there was 130,000 too few poll workers to run our elections predicted for the midterms. Could a veteran service organization rally 26 other veteran service organizations together, the NFL, the Chamber of Commerce, and launch a campaign called Vet the Vote? And in a matter of months, nearly halve the shortage of poll workers. As of yesterday morning, we had 55,000 poll workers, veterans and military family members from across the country, recruited through Vet the Vote to serve their neighbors, help their neighbors vote, and support American civics. So we're here. Thank you. That's what we're going to be talking about for the next 3 days, those kinds of positive solutions. And again, I invite you to join us. Thank you.
And I'm just going to say a couple words about the issue of extremism among police officers, which was part of the track, the other part of the track that Bill and I worked on. There are going to be several panels discussing the nature of this threat. You already heard this morning about the constitutional sheriff's movement, this idea that we have sheriffs across the country who believe that there is no authority above them. We all also witnessed the involvement of active duty law enforcement during January 6th. And although the number of these extremist law enforcement officers might be small, they obviously pose a huge challenge to communities, in particular communities of color, to the justice system and how it functions, and to the morale and their fellow police officers who are not involved in these things, which is obviously the bulk of them. So we have a lot of solutions on that front, including toolkits, ways to manage the problem, landscape analysis of it, so I hope you'll join us in some of those panels today. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ron Schouten, and I am, among other things, a psychiatrist, the field of medicine devoted to human behavior, where it comes from, what can go wrong, and hopefully what we can do to relieve the suffering that goes along with that. This summit is about human behavior, some of the ugliest parts of it, in fact, but it's also about our behavior as human beings, and how we understand and how we respond to that ugliness in human behavior, and how we can intervene to stop extremism and hatred. And I'm here again this year because I want to be part of that effort, both personally and professionally. Now, there's been a theme about Laura asking people to do things, so I'm not going to go there, having just done that. But I have the privilege of moderating 2 panels and sitting on a third. One of the panel I'm speaking on, Jacob is going to talk about in a few minutes, and that's about the incel movement, and my role in that is to talk about what role mental illness may be playing in incels and their thinking and their behavior. I'm moderating another panel on bystander behavior with some of the international experts in the field about why people stand by when red flags are raised. Why don't they intervene, and what can we do to get them to respond? And then finally, I'm moderating a panel on the adolescent brain. Now, those of you who have raised adolescents, those of you who have been adolescents, know that that's a tough time of life, right? And so we have this wonderful panel put together. We have a neuroscientist, we have a couple of psychiatrists talking about the development of the adolescent brain, what can go wrong, what can go right, what happens developmentally, why people are susceptible to extremism. But that panel ends on a very upbeat note because we have a wonderful young man you're about to hear from who's going to talk about what things can be done, how to be an upstander, and how to intervene. Arjun?
Thank you, Ron. My name is Arjun Rath. I'm a sophomore in high school at the Middlesex School in Concord, Massachusetts. Last fall, when I was given the opportunity to speak with Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Reza, she told me something that sticks with me to this day and is absolutely essential to this conference. She said that my generation and the younger generations are the key to turning social media platforms from places that are known for hate and disinformation to places of curiosity and kindness, which we would all want to be. I'm here to tell my story, my interactions with hate. Not just my interactions, but how I have combated hate and what I tried to do on social media platforms to stop it and to eradicate it. As Ron just said, I will be speaking on the Adolescent Brain Panel, and I plan to work with all of you and learn from all of you with your incredible knowledge. I hope with working groups and all of your great plans to turn these great plans into great actions and find great solutions. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jacob Ware, and I'm a research fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, studying counterterrorism, as well as an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Those of you who joined us last year may remember that I delivered a brief talk on incels. I don't want to repeat myself too far, but for those who are new, let me give a very brief introduction. The term incel is a portmanteau for involuntary celibate. The incel movement is a group of young men who organize around the idea that certain physical, biological, social, and mental characteristics prevent them from having access to some kind of sexual marketplace. That marketplace, they argue, is dominated by so-called Chads and Stacys who exclude incels from participating. The result is an embittered community of males gathering in online chat rooms who perceive themselves as social outcasts and turn their ire primarily against women, including often in the form of violence. I'm here this year as one of the working group leads for Track 6, The Rise of Hate Among Young Adults. We've put together a number of excellent panels for you, a number of which will be dealing explicitly with the incel issue. We've brought together a range of scholars and practitioners with diverse views on the topic and the threat it poses. Typically, scholars studying the incel movement have been divided into three communities. You have the counterterrorism, law enforcement, security studies, and intelligence scholars who look at the violence itself, radicalization pathways, and profiles of attackers. You have feminist scholars who look at long-standing structural features such as hegemonic masculinity and misogyny and how they've allowed the movement to emerge. And you have psychologists who look at mental health and how personal vulnerabilities such as a history of being bullied might push individuals toward this extremist movement. And then you've typically had three main ways to combat this movement. Obviously, you have the law enforcement and counterterrorism professionals, those who seek to stop violence and arrest would-be attackers. You have social media and tech companies who perform takedowns online or might attempt to redirect radicals towards more benign material. And then you have non-profit efforts to build resilience online and offline and to stop radicalization and mobilization in the first place. So what we've tried to do at this summit is bring together those 6 communities for the first time to try to discuss tangible countermeasures that we can implement. We've brought together people working on the incel issue and more broadly the issue of young people falling into extremism from the worlds of academia, think tanks, government, and non-profits. We'll have panels on the role played by long-standing misogyny, on the importance of mental health, on countermeasures from the counterterrorism community, and more. We're also particularly looking forward to the conversations that occur outside of the formal program, after panels and in the lobby, where those of us working on similar issues can get together and see if we can inch the needle forward. That's why I come here, and that's what is so unique about Eradicate Hate. The ability to have all these brilliant people under the same roof who often disagree to work together to deliver lasting, real change. That's a real privilege and a real opportunity, and we should not allow it to pass us by. So for those of you who have come here with bold, new ideas, who are seeking feedback and support, please join us in Track 6 as we attempt to shape new countermeasures and finally start to make progress against the incel movement, the broader societal poisons that it reflects, as well as the much bigger issue of hate among children and young adults. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brett Steele. I am the Senior Director of Preventing Targeted Violence at the McCain Institute. And as with everyone, I want to thank Laura and the steering committee. It's a measure of how persuasive Laura is that I'm speaking on 6 panels while 7 months pregnant. So Laura asked us to speak to our why. What brings us individually to eradicate hate year over year? For me, and for the McCain Institute, we're working to build a community of practice through Track 2 that will make it possible for any individual or family in crisis contemplating violence to find the resources they need to redirect that behavior into more positive outlets. So building that community of practice among mental health practitioners, behavioral health practitioners, and all of the diverse resources that we see. Last year, we held a single panel on what does prevention look like across the United States and Canada. This year, we have an entire track. And I'll turn it over to my colleague Emma to walk us through that track.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Cardelli. I'm a clinical psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital, It's a real pleasure to be here with you all this morning. And again, Laura, thank you so much for being you and for inviting us all here today to be a part of this tremendous effort. So with our Prevention in Practice track, really what we're looking to do is truly delve into the practice, just like Brett was saying. I myself, as a clinical psychologist, am really here because I would like to see, encourage, be a part of supporting other mental health researchers and clinicians like myself to step into the fight against hate. And to do that, we put together a track that really has several different goals. One, we're going to be examining and addressing barriers to entry for clinical professionals in secondary and tertiary prevention, and building professional standards to guide the work when those of you who practice in this space know there are very few professional standards to guide that work now. We're going to be exploring behavioral and social ecological factors that enhance vulnerability to hate-fueled violence and consider how prevention programs can most effectively address those factors while also leveraging existing strengths and resources at the individual, familial, and community levels. We're going to be outlining what multidisciplinary teamwork truly looks like in this space and to begin to standardize the role of formers as a critical element of effective and compassionate multidisciplinary practice. We're going to be co-developing systems of care that recognize and support the critical role of intimate bystanders in prevention, discussing what prison programs in parallel fields like trauma-informed care, gang violence, and addictions can teach us about really promising techniques to combat hate-fueled violence. We're going to be examining the tools we are all currently using, those of us who are practicing in this space are currently using, to address and manage risks to hate-fueled violence. And we're going to be working together to improve those tools so they really help us help others more effectively. And finally, our track seeks to generate solutions for effective law enforcement and mental health partnerships to help improve collaborative practice across these two sectors.
So the other theme you've heard this morning already is the theme of deliverables. Last year, we were very explicitly told that every panel had to have a deliverable, and this year is no different. So I'm here to present two deliverables that we've put together since the last year that we all gathered at Eradicate Hate, and to ask for your help in getting these deliverables out to the people who need them most. The first is a directory. The McCain Institute hosts the Prevention Practitioners Network, which is a network of over 875 interdisciplinary professionals committed to preventing targeted violence and terrorism, as well as their impacts across the United States. We've put together a directory of resources and clinically licensed providers who are all willing to talk to individuals and communities in need. We encourage all of you to join this directory. I have 4 members of my team here at this conference, and we will have flyers throughout the conference. We will also ask Laura to get that QR code to you. Please consider joining this directory and making your resources available to the people who need them most. Second, just this past week, we launched a campaign called Screen Hate. This is a resource for parents and concerned adults to understand where youth are exposed to hate online, conversation starters for how to develop open lines of communication with teens and young adults about this topic, and resources, including that directory of providers, so that if you do know someone in crisis, you know where to go for help. You can search by region, by specialty, by insurance taken, and find those providers that can be most supportive to the people in your life. So please, those are my 2 asks for you. 1, join the directory, and 2, share the Screen Hate campaign. We're partnering with Moonshot to get that out to bystanders who are running searches online that suggest they're concerned about someone they love, And similarly, we're partnering with One World Strong to host that directory in the Resilience Net app. So please, we're delivering deliverables. We ask all of you to help get those out to the people who need them most, and join us in Track 2 for prevention and practice.
Good morning. I'm Robert Rosenthal, the CEO of the Center for Investigative Reporting, and I'm happy to be here. I have the honor of being a victim of Laura's tsunami, and I'm involved in 2 tracks. And I'll start on the first one. I'm a lifelong journalist, and I believe that storytelling and telling the story of all of you is crucial to fighting hate and intolerance. And one of the reasons I'm here as a journalist is because I think unusual collaborations and the ability of journalists to tell stories and your stories is crucial. One of the takeaways I had last year was a huge amount of information and data that was just sort of siloed in a sense and not getting out there to the public. So I really encourage all of us to think about new collaborations and partnerships based on trust and getting information out and quality information to the public that really tells the story and humanizes as much as possible the challenges we face. What I'm here also about, why I'm here, is a deep commitment and understanding that having a mission and passion, which we all have, really keeps you going at all elements of your life. And it's exciting for me at this point in my life to be back as CEO of CIR and doing stories that really make a difference. And I'm really here to learn. The other track I'm in is completely different, and it's really about a solution and a challenge in my life around trauma that led me to San Quentin Prison and being engaged with a group of lifers, 33 men, who combined had been in prisons 864 years, 33 men. In that group, I think they'd committed 23 homicides, violent criminals who were the wisest and most spiritual group of human beings I'd ever been involved with. And what I saw there was transformation, their own internal transformation and solution around really looking inside yourself with willingness to really change and become a better human being, and becoming a better human being with the intention of helping not only yourself, but others. So I'm really honored to have, moderating a panel with some of those men and others who have been involved in what I'll call spiritual transformation as a solution. One person at a time to some of the challenges we're talking about here today. The other big opportunity in this room and around the world is each one of you and each one of your organizations represents a node in a global network that has to be energized and really connected in a much more effective and efficient way than I think we're doing today. These network driven by hate, fear, intolerance, going after the other is much more motivated, I think, right now than the network what I'll call for good. So coming out of this conference, I really believe that network has to be continually and engaged and activated. And that's the biggest opportunity I see here today. And it's really driven by everyone's passion and commitment to making a difference in their own lives and the lives of the whole world. So thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mary McCord. I'm a nearly 25-year veteran of the Department of Justice. I now run the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection, or ICAP, at Georgetown Law. I said earlier today we sue militias. We also sue other people, too. We do criminal justice reform, immigration, First Amendment work, separation of powers, and we're suing the fraudulent electors in Wisconsin right now. Thank you. This summit is not just about hate. Yes, it was motivated by the hate-driven acts of violence such as the Tree of Life synagogue shooting, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. But what we've seen since those incidents is the merger of hate, political violence, and anti-democracy efforts. So when white supremacists, conspiracy theorists, and anti-government militia extremists join forces, we see the results. And it's not just what we saw on January 6th. right? It's intimidation of LGBTQ people just trying to exercise First Amendment rights. It's attacks on, it's anti-Semitic and racist attacks on people also trying to engage in their constitutional rights. It's threats against local, state, and federal public officials just for doing their job. It's intimidation of candidates for elected office and support for candidates who continue to spread falsehoods about the 2020 election and refuse to commit to accepting the results of the next election. And that's why it's important in these next few days and looking forward to 2023 and 2024 to bring people together to counter these threats and shore up our democracy. And we'll be doing some of that on track 5, but it also goes across so many other tracks. We've already started this. My organization and other organizations like Keep Our Republic and many of you here have been bringing together current and former elected officials, judges, prosecutors, law enforcement officers, private researchers, and community organizers and activists to learn about the threats and the false narratives that propel them, understand that violence and intimidation are not protected by the First and Second Amendments, and think creatively about solutions. Now, I want to dig in for just the minute or two that I have and what I'm talking about here. The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol was based on the false narrative of election fraud that drove the fraudulent electors scheme. This was the scheme in the swing states to send competing slates of electors, not those representing the votes of the people in those states, to Vice President Pence in the hope that he would accept these fraudulent electoral ballots instead of the legitimate ballots, overturning the will of the voters and giving the election to former President Trump. And at the very least, the scheme aimed to cause the Vice President to send the electoral ballots back in those swing states where tremendous pressure was being brought to bear on officials and state legislators to decertify the legitimate electors in favor of the illegitimate electors. It was this scheme that provided the quote-unquote legal justification for the extremists to attack the Capitol on January 6th. Well, now, election deniers are running for offices that have the authority over the administration of elections, ballot counting, and certifying the votes. This is not only at the local precinct level, but also at the state level. Now, white supremacists, conspiracy theorists, and anti-government extremists are continuing to spread disinformation, that is, intentional falsehoods about the integrity of our elections. Now, people in positions of power, elected members of Congress, elected state officials, are amplifying that disinformation, and worse, connecting the false narrative to current events like the search of Mar-a-Lago, promising riots in the streets if the former president is indicted, and stoking the same kind of insurrectionist sentiment that led to January 6th. Now, polling shows Americans with increasingly disturbing views about the acceptability of political violence and even civil war. Now, extremists seek to ally with current and former military and law enforcement. The time to counter these threats is now, through bipartisan efforts at the local, state, and national level to speak out against hate and political violence, and we're all doing that here, to promote a greater understanding of that the First and Second Amendments are not boundless, to eradicate extremists from the military and law enforcement, and that's going to be part of a panel on Wednesday, and to use all available legal options, including laws against unlawful militia activity, voter intimidation, and threats, to protect America's constitutional rights and participation in our democracy. And I hope you'll join in some of these panels addressing these topics.
Hello. My name is Seamus Hughes. I'm the Deputy Director of the Program on Extremism at George Washington University. I've had a 20-year career in the legislative branch, working on bills to strengthen national security. I've worked in the executive branch on prevention programs to try to prevent folks from joining terrorist organizations or far-right extremism groups. And for the last 7 years, I've been in the Program on Extremism researching these groups. I was asked why. Why am I here? Why now? And quite simply, it's very simple, actually. I've had enough. I've had enough of sitting in houses of victims across this country, from California to New York. I've had enough of talking to grieving mothers and fathers about what had happened. I've had enough of talking to perpetrators of the most atrocious acts of violence that we've seen. And so when given the option to do something, I said yes, and all of you in this room did too. I am not naive enough to think that we can change the world in 3 days, but I'm also not cynical enough to think we can't make a difference in 3 days. So I look forward to this conference every year. Now, where are we now? We've got 2,700 active investigations in all 50 states for far-right extremism, another 1,000 active investigations for ISIS and al-Qaeda cases, 2,700 anti-Semitic attacks and plots last year, a 30% increase from the previous year, about 7 a day on average. We've seen a rise in the number of hate crimes and extremism and terrorism in this country. And it's expanding, it's enduring, but it's not insurmountable. And so I am here because I've had enough. And I think all of you are in this room because you've had enough too. And I hope that we are able to do something for it. So I'm on a number of tracks looking at organized hate, looking at groups like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. And what are the legal strategies we have to deal with this? What are the academic strategies we have to deal with this? How do we roll up our sleeves and do something about this? Now, this 20-year career has taught me a lot, but one of them first is that my faith is paramount. And I'm reminded of Psalms 30, which says, "Anger endures for a moment, tears endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning." We have a moment right now to provide some level of joy, to say enough is enough, and let's figure this out together. So I want to thank you for the honor to be a part of this group, and I look forward to working with you on this.
What a great lead-in, Seamus. Thank you. Laura Ellsworth and Mark Nordenberg sent me from the Hope Patrol. My name is Patrice O'Neill. I am a filmmaker and director of Not in Our Town. My tracks deal with storytelling and community. And over these 25 years, I've learned that storytelling can unlock incredible know-how in local communities that can lead to real solutions in the fight against hate. I do feel like I'm in a room of rock stars, and I'm so honored to be here and know that the songs that you're going to sing will affect our lives forever. The story that I want to start with, you may have heard, but it's important because we think about how stories morph and develop and how they can help us unlock things. So it started when my entry into this started with the story of white supremacists organizing, trying to take over the Northwest. And they wanted to lay claim to Billings, Montana. Started with graves being overturned in a Jewish cemetery. There was an early adherent to community policing who said to the community, "I can't do this alone, we have to do this together." When skinheads started showing up at an African-American church, members of other denominations showed up there, the skinheads went away. When a Native American woman's home was plastered with racist graffiti, 30 members of the painters union were there to paint it over and 100 neighbors were there to watch. The town knew that they could see the effectiveness of what they were doing together. Then a 6-year-old Jewish boy placed a menorah in his window for Hanukkah. Brick landed on his bed. It was thrown through the window, landed on his bed. People knew it was becoming more dangerous. They said, "What if we're all Jewish?" That year, the local newspaper printed a full-page menorah, and 10,000 people put menorahs in their windows, and the white supremacist organizing stopped. We told that story in a PBS film, and it was clear that there was this great unlocking that was happening in the fight against hate then, about people joining forces to stop hate, and it spread. I remember the first time I had dinner with Laura and Mark. Mark told me the story of when the Klan came to Pittsburgh and how he stood in a theater and watched thousands of Pittsburghers march up the street from a rally to say no to the Klan and then join together in the theater to watch Not in Our Town and learn from each other about what they could do to resist hate. Stories spread, they can make a difference. And this unlocking has led to many years of other unlockings. I've seen it again in this film that we just did, Repairing the World, Stories from the Tree of Life. It's about Pittsburgh. There is an incredible unlocking in this complex time that's happening in this city in Pittsburgh. And our goal is to show this film, share it in Pittsburgh and in communities around the country, and see what new know-how we can extract from our local communities. It is the place where the threat is greatest and where the solutions, I think, are most profound. So we have several storytelling tracks and a community track that we're participating in. I hope you can think about how to bring your stories, how to use ours in your work. I am so grateful to be here. Please come watch our film, the whole thing, in case some of you saw it last night. It'll be in room 406, and come join us in this discussion about storytelling and community. And now I want to introduce my friend, Bill Eisler.
Good morning. I'm Bill Eisler. I am the Emeritus CEO and President of Fred Rogers Productions here in Pittsburgh. And I'm here for two reasons. One, the co-chair of the panel in which I'm going to speak about, Deb Kaplan, is unable to be here today, so I am filling in for her, which is not an easy task to do. And the second thing is to talk a little bit about the panel that is tomorrow afternoon called Community Response Not in Our Town. I also co-chair the Center for Love and Kindness and Civic Engagement of the Jewish Community Center here in Pittsburgh. So we have been involved in this city for a long time in looking for solutions. And the one thing I know is that we know what works. And what we want to do with this panel is, based on what we have learned here in Pittsburgh, with Patrice's film, with folks that are on the ground every day working to help to eradicate hate, we want to discuss how communities can work to develop the necessary tools to prevent and respond to violence. So it's a panel to talk about what we know and what we think we have worked, what has worked. But it is also a call to action that the conveners of this summit have charged that when we finish with that panel, that a working group will be developed to come up with workable solutions, toolkits that can be used in communities around the country and the world that can help them eradicate hate in their neighborhoods. As I said in the beginning, we know what works. What we want to do as a result of the panel tomorrow and the ongoing work that will be done is to help communities with the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we have learned from putting this panel together. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Chardelli. I'm here with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Thank you, Laura and Mark, for the incredible work, again, of convening all of us. I come here thinking about the power of education as well as storytelling, which Patrice and Bill were just speaking about. At the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, we are first and foremost a memorial institution. We remember what happened, we mourn, and we hope that by remembering, we also educate and learn and think about not what would we have done back then, but what will we do now. We think about how and why the event of the Holocaust happened. That's our area of expertise, but doing that demands that we understand the risk factors at the macro level, the early warning signs at the micro level, the human behaviors that cause motivations and pressures that led, in many cases, ordinary people to behave in ways that they would have never thought that they would have behaved in that moment in time. This work, this educational work, is not just for students, although they're essential because they're plotting our path forward, but it's for all of us as adults who play so many different roles in our communities. And in fact, the work I do at the museum is with police and military, judiciary, government professionals to take time out of their day-to-day to stop and reflect on what it means to say an oath to our Constitution, what it means to have a professional role of responsibility in our democratic society, and how in our case that history allows us to better understand that today. Integral to this, the through line to this, are the stories of survivors that we have had the privilege and honor of working with. And in my work, I think of Sonia Weitz, who would talk about how she and her sister were the only survivors of the event and stopped counting in the 60s the number of family members they lost. I think of Bob Baer, who volunteered at the museum. Born in 1922 in Berlin, Germany, he was 10 when Hitler came to power. As secular Jew, he was still a victim of anti-Semitic legislation that when he was a kid meant he couldn't swim in the local swimming pool very early on. And he talked about what that meant to be excluded in a very human and real way. I think of Manja Friedman from Poland, who talked about the horrendous moment when she last saw her mother and father before being separated at a transport. None of those three remain with us to tell their stories firsthand, but I, who have no personal family connection to that history, bear the responsibility of telling their stories and making sure that others hear their stories so we can all learn what was so atrocious and damaging to them so that we can do better. That is why each of them relived the most terrible moments of their lives so that we could all do better. When we hear those human firsthand stories, and we saw a glimpse last night with Patrice's film, we know we have individuals in this room who have lived through terrible moments and publicize that, come forward and share it, as painful as that is, in the hope of making a better future. That is a responsibility on all of us. There's an urgency to it. They remind us that these datas and research, which are so essential to this work, are nothing without the human story. And so it's through this power of story that we contribute in an educational vein, in a storytelling vein, another tool that we can leverage all of the expertise in this room, the data points, the research, the expertise, through that human connector that reminds us that it's all of our responsibilities. So one of the panels this afternoon is telling the real stories of modern day hate. It's at 3 o'clock in room 317. This is an emerging potential working group trying to think of how we can learn from the field of Holocaust education and others that have collected testimony, which is such a delicate endeavor that requires such respect and thoughtfulness. How can we initiate an effort to collect and tell modern day stories of hate? So we would invite you to please join that panel and conversation this afternoon at 3. And thank you, everyone in this room. This is inappropriate to say, like I feel like a kid in a candy store. Everyone is doing such amazing, amazing work. It's just a real privilege and honor to be here. So thank you.
Hi, it's Mark Nordenberg, me again, from the University of Pittsburgh. I was kind of sitting at a table minding my own business when Arjun Rath, about a half hour ago, mentioned or passed along advice he had been given by others, suggesting that some of the problems that we face today probably would end up being dealt with by solutions developed in his generation. And I thought, as a lifelong educator, I should get up here and say first that while this room is filled with a healthy sense of urgency, it also is essential for us to be making investments in the future. So even as we push forward as effectively and as quickly as we can to address problems that are plaguing our society as quickly as tomorrow, we also do have to look down the road, because we won't solve all of the problems that exist today, and new problems are going to develop. So there are two things that I want to talk about in connection with this year's summit. The first is a traditional focused session that will be held on Wednesday afternoon, talking about the development of what I would describe as curricular tools for use both in K through 12 systems and in colleges and universities. We have 4 outstanding panelists one from K through 12 who actually is from here in Pittsburgh and who has developed what is known as the Light Initiative that can be replicated in other places, and then 3 representatives from higher education who are going to discuss the work that is being done in their institutions to try to give anti-hate or anti-hate studies a more significant place in the curriculum. The second thing that I want to describe is, I guess, more of an administrative matter. That is a goal that we are pursuing this year of attempting to engage teachers, faculty members, and students more effectively in the summit itself. And particularly because students at a distance would have challenges, most of them coming to Pittsburgh. Live stream is going to be a very effective tool on that front. But even for students in local colleges and universities, breaking away for 3 days near the beginning of an academic term can be next to impossible. So what we have tried to do is to provide what I will call scholarships to students who commit to coming for a half day. And we're trying to promote what I'm calling an attendance plus model. That is where the students come for a half day, and either the faculty member or the institution that is sponsoring them also provides some complementary experience so that there are opportunities to discuss issues before and after the summit. So Wasi Muhammad and I met one evening last week with a small group of undergraduates from the University of Pittsburgh, providing them with a sense of why it is this summit was created, why it continues to be so critically important, and how they can get involved. And I would say it was a wonderful dialogue, not quite what either Wasi or I had expected, because there was more than we could have imagined that some of the students wanted to add to the get-together. So we're moving on these fronts. We'll be reporting on our progress on these fronts. And any of you who are interested or have ideas, again, the curricular session is Wednesday afternoon, and I will always be open to the ideas that you would like to share about engaging teachers, faculty, and students. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm David Gartenstein-Ross, the founder and CEO of Valens Global, and it's an honor to be here at Eradicate Hate, and an honor to close out what has been colloquially described as the longest panel in the Earth's history. I wanted to talk about my why. Why am I here, and why is this summit important to me? When I came back from last year's summit, I spoke to my team members and so many others about how inspirational I found Eradicate Hate to be. And that's because Eradicate Hate is the first conference I attended that I felt challenged me and everyone else to be better than what we were. And I want to talk about that in 3 ways. I want to talk about that in a way that is inward, a way that represents this moment, and a way that is outward facing. To talk inward, as we've looked out for years, we've seen the storm clouds of hatred gathering. And for years, They've not just gathered, but boiled, or rather, moved into torrential downpour. All the speakers thus far have articulated this very well. Abraham Lincoln, paraphrasing the Gospel of Matthew, said that a house divided against itself shall not stand. And often we, those involved in counter-extremism work, counter-hate work, are that house divided. This is structural. The awkward place where our field sits as a new field at the intersection of policy and the media and academia, it's easy for disagreements or strong personalities to boil over into something that we should not represent. How can we counter hate out there if we can't counter it amongst ourselves? And looking at the diverse perspectives, the people from different lanes, the people from different disciplines who normally don't talk to one another, I realized that was the first thing where it asked us to be better than what we are, that we should not be a house divided. Secondly, it challenges us to be better in the moment. As has been said, every single track asks for a deliverable. And I think the question for all of us is, can we come up with those transformative ideas that can take these storm clouds upon us and change the situation locally, regionally, nationally, and globally? It's not incrementalism. It's not op-eds or tweets or Facebook posts that will be our way out of this situation. And then third, from this moment, looking outward, can we implement? It's a question of bringing resources together, partners who may not have worked together, funding, connecting with the people who need it, understanding the opportunities that there are to make a difference. Those are the three ways that I think the summit challenges us to be better. And the common thread to all of them is human relationship, how we relate to one another, how we see one another in the moment, and how we understand the opportunity to learn from and work with each other. I'm honored for the next 3 days to participate in a few different panels. Today I'll be moderating a panel on taxonomy, whether we need a common terminology to move us forward. Tomorrow, I'm looking at a comprehensive framework for countering racially and ethnically motivated violent extremism, moderating a panel on what the Global Counterterrorism Forum has been doing in this regard, and also participating in a panel on public and private partnerships. And finally, the last day, the important panel that Vidya mentioned at the outset on protecting those who protect. But as I said, looking at why this is so transformative, it's all of us here. It's the relationships and the opportunity to parlay these moments together into something bigger, something transformative, something that can make the difference that all of those who depend upon us deserve. Thank you.
You know, people often ask me, what is the summit? The summit is the people that you just saw. The summit is you. The summit is what each of us chooses to bring to the table. And I think what you just saw illustrated is when we come to the table together, there is nothing that we cannot achieve together. And I'll mention one last panel that's coming up. It's the next one, and then I'm going to give you a 15-minute break. But you're going to want to come back for this panel for the following reason. Last year, one of our keynote speakers was a woman named Alice Indiritu, who is the Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide at the United Nations. And she came to give a keynote on the first day, and she had 2 international trips scheduled immediately thereafter. And she sat at that front table next to me. And she watched the panels, the early panels, and she leaned over to her assistant and she said, we will stay, cancel. And she sat for 3 days and she listened to the extraordinary people who were bringing things to the table. And about a month after the summit, she called me. And she said, you know, the UN Secretary General has an action plan against hate that was designed to be customized to specific cohorts and that the UN rolls out around the world. It started focused on leaders of faith for obvious reasons. And the UN convened a specific version about things that faith leaders could do to combat hate. And then the UN used the convening power to take that around the world for the next 2 years. She said, we've decided that what we want to do is light up the world of sport, because the voice of sport is unifying, it is influential to the perpetrators of this mass violence, overwhelmingly young men, 19 to 24 years old, and the voices of sport matter. She said, will you help us do that? Will you team with us? Will the summit team with us? So we reached out to Michelle Rosenthal, who you've heard a lot about and you'll meet in a moment, whose brothers David and Cecil were killed at Tree of Life. And Michelle, as many of you know, was also the public affairs and community affairs lead for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We said, Michelle, will you lead this working group and partner with the Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide at the UN and create the action plan against hate speech directed to sport? And I won't steal their thunder, but we met for 2 hours yesterday here in a working group meeting with the top leaders of just about every sport league that there is. And you will be hearing more about what's going to come of that. And I tell you that story in this panel for the following reason. There was one extraordinary woman who sat there and listened. There was another extraordinary woman who was led through her own passion and her own grief to achieve amazing things. There is one person sitting out there who is grieving and who wants some way to make that death matter. There is somebody out there who has the ability to deliver an amazing opportunity, as Alison Dorito did for us. Bring those opportunities to the table. And our commitment to you from the summit is this: we will make your time worthwhile. We will bring you the resources and the individual human beings who can walk shoulder to shoulder with you to achieve what you see in your mind's eye. So please take a short break. Please be back here at 11 o'clock. You're going to want to hear this extraordinary panel. And thank you for being part of the summit.